Okay, if you watch my channel here lately, you've probably seen I've done a few on the ancient Sphinx here. The Sphinx, you can tell, has been totally redone. The legs and feet and everything from the rot that was there, and it was just totally devastated away. The back of it here, you can tell, is just eroded out, and easily now you can tell this head is just way too small for it. People have said that, and it's been recarved over time. There's a lot of stories about that, and I've been looking into it quite a bit, and I found one piece of evidence a long time ago that I couldn't correlate, which was one of the combs that they actually have. They're little hair picks they stick in their hair, and a lot of them are real neat, where on one side of them it's real small fine hairs for like picking out lice they apparently had a problem of and going through their fine hair, and then the other side is to, whenever you pull your hair back, you can stick it into it and leave it into there, and prongs and things. I'd like to show you a couple of these. It gives you a little bit of an idea, because many people have many ideas of who the Sphinx used to be. Now, many people do say that they think that it was a lion, and indeed it has the tail curled up against his body just like these. And the one that I had seen before that I was telling you about looked much like this, only the line went all the way across. The differential was, though, that it had a few spikes sticking out of his back that were broken off, and the head almost seemed to be turned slightly, or maybe it was just, bad graphics. And this is one of those old ivory ones that comes from the first few dynasties. And then you see a lot of them that are set up like this, where they actually have the lotus flower emblem coming out of it in the stalks. But once you investigate this more, these lotus flowers here in the 4 quadruplet is really more of a sign of papyrus plant than the lotus. The lotus is more in the fanned emblem, and you can find both of these in that symbolism. And indeed, there are some old amulets that they found that have this type of depiction, where it is turned a little more towards you and the paws are crossed over each other, having that distinct tail that's there, though. And of course, so a lot of people say that it used to be a lion. Really? Yeah, they said it used to be a lion, but a lot of people thought it might be a dog, like a talking lion character or something. Well, no, a dog or a lion, but not a lion dog. Others thought it could be a leopard because of the ancient symbolism that they have, and indeed there are some depictions of leopards also with their head, or female lions with their tail curled, and indeed it could have been a female lion. But I found a guy while I was researching for the broken nose that Napoleon supposedly shot off, and things, that had a new idea or two. And so while I was trying to compile this and put it together, I found that just today he put out something, and I want to share it with you because it kind of saves a little bit of my video footage. So a lot of the old palettes that they have, and you search around and try to find, and you're looking for things that look like this, and it's hard to find something that looks like this. But you know the old stories about how this stele was found right up in front of it here in the old days. And so, was it a leopard? Because there's pictures like this where it's a leopard, a lion. Did it look like this? I mean, how did it actually look? You can tell all this ancient stonework here is brought from someplace else. They're trying to repurpose and do all this. And Robert Schoch had a great idea. You've probably seen my video on the erosion pattern that was here. So he's also just got on Joe Rogan and done a thing on there, which is pretty neat. And he talks about how the rain patterns must have been a long, long time ago to cause the amount of erosion. And indeed, it could have been swallowed over in a primordial area that probably wasn't as jungle as this. But that erosion pattern is shown through the area. Now, it was found all covered up like this. And so if it was covered like this, maybe it didn't get so much. And then it looks like it's in a sinkhole here, doesn't it? So maybe it was the drain for the whole area, and that's a cause for a lot of the erosion that's there. So it's looked at as being there before the pyramid was there. And it could have been a female lion or a leopard or something a lot like this. Back in the time before Narmer, and the time whenever Egypt even got together in the first place, that it could have been some lion-headed thing like this that was in the pit that eventually eroded out. I mean, the erosion on this thing is terrible whenever you find out how solid that stone is, and it just doesn't correlate and make too much sense. So people say, lion, jackal, dog, Anubis, person's head, what was it in the old times? And it could be a lot of different things, and a lot of people have different views upon it. Clearly, everybody's agreeing now that it got resculptured in maybe the Middle Kingdom era, because the way the headdress looks, it looks like a Middle Kingdom era type of headdress, and so it probably wouldn't be before that. But you look around on a lot of these papyruses and you end up finding a few things that look very sphinx-ish, and jackals don't have the tail twisted right whenever they depict those. Here's a lion though, and that looked like the top of that comb I was telling you about. And so people talked about this as some UFO landing on the Sphinx thing, right? And this guy got a key off of that. There is that fan. Now that's the lotus fan, like what, that fans the pharaohs. And so, interestingly, there's a little hole in the back of the Sphinx there that's just a shaft that goes down, and there's one in the head also. And these fans here represent a king being fanned or wind, and you can even see it on the old Narmer palette that's here in Scorpion and stuff. So these fans are symbolic of kingship, right? And so there's a lot of symbology in ancient Egypt's looks, and fan bearers are everywhere. And so these fans symbolically show, or at least are attached to, kingship. You don't see people that aren't kings getting fanned very much. And so you look at the fan, the way that it's splayed out here, and that's different than what you would see as being like the papyrus spikes that would stick up that I was talking about. But indeed, this kind of looks like the top of that comb, whereas these, and there are combs with this on it, is that lotus fan, and you can see how it's spread out, and you can see it in his hand here, how the real ones give the depiction of it. But the other fan is almost like one of those Chinese fans that flop out and then you fan yourself with the pictures on them that they do. And all this goes back to a god named Hapi that in the olden times is always drawn as blue, and he seems to be the primordial god of water. And indeed, the original name for the Nile itself seems to have been Hapi, right? And so on his head you see the papyrus stalks that are on that, symbolizing the reeds and things that come from the lower part of Egypt, which is closer to the Mediterranean. The upper part is up, it's kind of backwards and everything on it. Quite often shown with some boobies though too, and a lot of people say it's kind of an androgynous thing, but yet there is a lot of proof to the fact that the Nile was named Hapi. It's even written on the walls in many places, and a lot of the old elder tombs called upon him more. Back in the Old Kingdom, through the Mid Kingdom, there's some a little later, but generally he's called upon, and he's the god of this Nile, that's there. And they show a symbolic tying of these stalks together with people from north and south, are basically him as a twin of himself on a lot of depictions where they tie them from the north and south, showing you that they're together now and binding together and things like that. And this depiction is seen 30 times maybe in Egypt and stuff. And in fact, on these giant statues here, which I believe are at Karnak, you can see it on the side right there of it too. So Hapi is always again in blue for that symbolic water god, and so he's almost like Neptune. And now in this depiction, when you look at it, there's Horus riding down the river on a boat on the Nile. So this is with the Nile, and there's Hapi on the ground and depicting himself as being the Nile itself. And there's a cartouche above that, but it doesn't say anything inside of it. But there is Hapi. It's on the ground. And so all these, and in fact the god above Hapi here is a god that is of the Nile itself and its fertility and things. So this is kind of a whole symbology. And the thing around the top of it is Nut, and she is the sky, or mother nature of the sky, or the Milky Way, the band of stars holding up the sky there. So that could have a lot to do with it. You can see kind of that depiction done here, done there, and this is probably the original depiction of it. So was it even a lion? You know, even on the wall here, you can see that they've always got this fan on them. And even on some of the old palettes there, some of the oldest writings that they have it in there. Back when Happy was more accepted more as a god, and perhaps they knew the symbolism of Leo from back then, or the cat symbolism, or the things that they had back then that they had lost whenever this thing got buried. I don't know if you know the stories, but in the Middle Kingdoms, one of them found it totally swamped up like this, totally covered, even worse than this perhaps, and dug out in the front of it, found the stele, had a special dream, and ended up remaking that. And probably that's whenever they redid the image on the head, and of course they had to make it smaller. Now they talk about how it's facing towards Leo and stuff and all these deals, but really it does face the Nile, and so it could still have to do with Happy. And there's that fan on his back, and there's the hole I was talking about that's on his back, that perhaps there was a stanza that was stood up inside there that looked much like this in the old times. And in fact, on the head of him there, where you see the snake, that there is one on top of his head too, and there could have been something stuck inside there as another type of stanza. Now, so still we're kind of confused on whether it could have been a lion or a leopard, but I think jackal's out. Although Anubis is still a possibility, I think with the tail curl that you see here that looks exactly like it, the posture and things, that it was always a primordial thing like that. Even on Narmer's palette here that we look at, there's a lot of symbolism that you can see, but what this guy found on the Narmer palette ironically looks just like my comb without the comb part stuck to the bottom of it. And that could lead to what the real symbology behind this was. I mean, again, did Egypt even know what it was? Because it was all buried up. And here you can see all these different rebuildings and times that they had rebuilt it through the different ages of it. So it had to have been way, way older. And Schock believes it's over 10,000 BC, sitting in a primordial area. And they may have found it just like a giant head and didn't even know the body truly existed, that there was a cat form even below it. Did the ancient or early dynastic Egyptians know about it until they had done it? They clearly at that point had pretty much lost the god Happy. They had changed over God somewhat, switched over. Now comes the ages of Ra and all these things that people are going with. It wasn't so much a Horus or a Seth type thing going as much anymore, although Seti was during this time. Ramses is during this time. So I guess I can't say that legally, but the symbolism here with it all in his back and then the spike that's on there, there's a few other depictions where it shows this, and it actually has the stalks on the back of it just like this. Now those papyrus stalks are going to show you where here on the Narmer palette, you can actually see it right here where Horus has gotten control of this guy, and this guy looks just like that guy. And he's got the papyrus out of him. And see that little back that looked like a boat? Here he is in the Orion position, smiting his enemy like they always show. And so this is like the first depiction that they really have of that. He's always got his mace, and he's in that Orion position. And that head matches the head that's on the Narmer palette. So it almost looks like that's symbolic of he was the guy of the Delta area that he's smiting and taking over from the north, and there it is. And you see how the back looks just like a boat. There's no arms on it. And so this could have been what it looked like before they resculpted it to look what it looks like now today. I think it's quite unique, but that comb that I saw looked about like this, but then you needed to just add the comb under the bottom of it, and you just needed to add the comb under the bottom of it, and it would end up looking like it. And here again we have the blue-eyed Horus, and he's pulling onto the nose like got him by a hook almost. It looks like rope though. I don't know, this symbolically, instead of being wrapped around his neck, is wrapped up into his nose. He's got him hooked by the nose. Well, that's how they used to have cows, where they had hooked them by the nose, right, and put a ring in their nose. So this easily could be that symbology. But I think this guy is onto the track because this is the same track I saw, only it didn't have the fan. It had the papyrus. Most of them were broke off. This is what it looked like before it was broke off. So it had to have been early dynastic, lower Egyptian versus higher Egyptian comb. And they indeed did date it to 2nd to 4th dynasty, I believe, early pre-dynastic to 4th dynasty on that comb that I had seen. So quite unique, and I think that could easily be where we got the Sphinx from, where its original symbology comes from, the original head and the way that it looked, and it all comes from this Narmer palette, which strangely also one thing to mention is it does have Hathor here. It has the bull god, so it says that cattle are already being introduced here, and it had been introduced here from in the Asian area before this had even happened. From Sumerian cattle and up in north, and around the Urartu area, that it had already somewhat happened. Perhaps it wasn't fully going. Maybe they didn't have the crops for them to eat and everything else going just right. It wasn't a full farming culture at this point, coming just out of hunter-gatherers. But I think it's neat, and I think it kind of shows a possibility. I'm not saying that's exactly going to be it. Who knows what they'll find in another dig. But I think this does give a lot of play to the idea that that is the original Sphinx picture and the original Sphinx concept. Like, share, and subscribe, guys. We'll have more on this soon as it develops. Peace.